Good morning. Welcome to the September board meeting of San Jacinto River Authority. Thank you all for being here. We ask that you check your cell phones to make sure they're off so we don't have any interruptions during the meeting. There's a specific protocol for addressing the board. There are forms just outside the door here that you can fill out if you would, so we have a record of anyone that wishes to address the board. So if anyone needs to do that right now, that'd be fine. If not, quorum being present, we'll call the board meeting to order. First item is I would ask Jim, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, or stand please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Be seated. At this time, we're going to have a presentation from General Manager Jacinto regarding Hurricane Harvey. And we recognize that this is a topic of concern, and we ask that please refrain from interruptions. There's a separate, again, agenda item for anyone that wants to address the board, and you'll be allowed to do so at that time. I'll let Jace Houston, the General Manager, give us our presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. Board members, the purpose of this briefing, I'm going to do a very thorough PowerPoint, and the goal here is I want to give an overview of the rainfall event, help kind of give a bigger picture understanding of the data that's considered by operators throughout a storm event like this. We'll go over some of the gate operating principles, and then I'm going to go over some of the answers to what we have received as very common questions, not just in this event, but any of the large storm events that we've managed. Before I start, I do want to express the very sincere thoughts and prayers of all the SRA staff for everyone that's dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. We know this was a very destructive and catastrophic rainfall event, impacted a lot of people. Secondly, I do want to make note of and thank for the record all of the emergency officials and law enforcement personnel that we partnered with throughout this storm event. Like any storm event that we cover, we partner with emergency management and first responders in Harris County and Montgomery County throughout the event. In fact, we do tabletop exercises from time to time to practice the various roles that we all play in those events, but during the storms, they're the ones that are out in the field managing evacuations and road closures, and we certainly want to note and appreciate their efforts on that and their partnership. All right. First part of this, I've got a number of slides that will walk us through basically a time sequence of the storm. I'm going to start on Friday, August 18th. This was 7 days prior to landfall. And one of the things that we do during all major storm events is we begin participating early on in the development of a storm in daily briefings with the National Weather Service. And these briefings include emergency responders all up and down the Texas Gulf Coast. And they prepare a briefing packet. And they generally start out once a day. And then as the storm event gets closer, they will increase the frequency to 3 times a day on these briefings. So a lot of the slides I'll show you today come from those briefings. This was Friday, August 18th. This was the afternoon briefing. This is, as I mentioned, 6 or 7. This is 1 week, 7 days prior to landfall. At this time, the information from the National Weather Service was that the storm posed no immediate threat to southeast Texas. I mean, you can see that the track is still into Mexico. 6 days prior to landfall, on Saturday, August 19th, the storm actually dissipated. So basically, Harvey became just an area of low pressure east of central America. You can see it there in the Gulf. And the storm essentially dissipated at that point, 6 days prior to landfall. Now, on August 22nd, 3 days later, the low pressure area had moved over the Yucatan Peninsula. And this is the briefing data from the 8 a.m. or the morning briefing from National Weather Service, noting that the remnants of Harvey were likely to redevelop into a tropical storm or hurricane as it left the Yucatan Peninsula and entered the Bay of Campeche. But the track details that we were receiving at this time noted that the track was still uncertain. And during that briefing, we also received rainfall predictions, and at this time the rainfall predictions were basin averages of 4 to 8 inches. So I heard one news report where someone stated we knew 2 weeks ahead of the storm that we were going to get 50 inches of rainfall, and that was certainly not an accurate statement. Because, as I mentioned, 1 week out it dissipated into a low pressure area, and then here on the Tuesday, but prior to landfall, we were receiving forecasts 4 to 8 inches in the basin, which is not really a major storm event for our area. Now, August 23rd, so this is Wednesday, this is 2 days prior to landfall. In the morning briefing on Wednesday, the National Hurricane Center began issuing advisories on Tropical Depression Harvey. We also received, again, updated precipitation, updated rain forecasts for the event. And the bottom right graphic shows the prediction. They were estimating 10 to 15 inches near the coast, but the further inland from the coast, the lower the rainfall amounts, as you can see from the graph on the right. And the numbers are a little hard to see, but basically the Lake Conroe watershed is in the 6 to 10 inch rainfall zone, and then Harris County and south of that was in the 10 to 15 inch or greater rainfall zone. Now later that day, this is still Wednesday, 2 days prior to landfall, you've got at our 4 o'clock briefing updated rainfall forecasts. This is the latest information. I'm going to zoom in on that prediction. So that afternoon, still the Lake Conroe watershed, which is the arrow on the left, was in basically the 6 to 10 inch rainfall band in terms of prediction. And Harris County south of us, Lake Houston watershed, was in the 10 to 15 inch rainfall band. Now moving on to Thursday, August 24th, and you can see the location of the storm at this point, 1 day out from landfall. The notice from the Weather Service indicated that Tropical Storm Harvey was intensifying, so we were getting updated information. This was the morning briefing. And this is the updated rainfall that we received at that morning briefing on Thursday. And still, it's a little hard to see, but the Lake Conroe watershed is still in basically the 6 to 10 inch band in terms of rainfall estimated for the event. This is a multi-day forecast. Now that began to change at the 4 o'clock briefing that afternoon. They began to increase, and this is Thursday's 1 day out from landfall. They began to increase the rainfall estimates. So I'm going to zoom in. This is from Thursday morning, from the 11 a.m. briefing to the 4 p.m. briefing on Thursday. You can see that on the left, we were still in that 6 to 10 inch zone in terms of rainfall estimates. And by the afternoon, they had upgraded us to the 10 to 15 inch rainfall estimates for Montgomery County, but still southern Montgomery County, Harris County, they had increased that to the 15 to 25 inch estimate. At that same briefing, and these briefings are, several, probably 24 pages typically. There's a lot more information that's provided. But one of the other pieces of information they provide is from the River Forecast Center. And they provide all of the emergency response agencies with predictions of the different river basins that they expect to reach major or record flood level. And at this time, on Thursday, you can see most of the basins that were expected to reach flood stage are still basically south and southwest of Harris County. And they're listed there on the left. So on Friday, August 25th, Hurricane Harvey made landfall at Rockport, Texas. You see the track that was issued at that time. In terms of the general forecast for our area, the Weather Service was basically telling us at this time that they were expecting no changes in terms of the general warnings or forecast. In terms of rainfall, they were still estimating 15 to 25 inches, now even areas that might be greater than that, but less rainfall further inland. That was basically the pattern throughout the storm event. So looking at the rainfall prediction specifically, this is the 11 a.m. Friday morning briefing, the day of landfall. I'll zoom in on that graphic. Lake Conroe watershed is basically now in the 8 to 15 inch rainfall zone, and you've now obviously have greater than 15 inches throughout all of Harris County and further south, even in isolated 40 now is being mentioned in the rainfall predictions. On Saturday, so this is the first day after landfall, this is the current track that was issued at that time. Our area began receiving heavy rainfall on Saturday. In fact, here at the dam, the rains began around 1 a.m. Saturday morning. It's just one of the radar images. They began issuing the rainfall predictions on a daily basis, so you can see on the left graphic was their prediction for basically Saturday night, and then you've got Sunday night on the right, and then Monday, and of most interest to me was the 5-day total. So still, the 5-day totals were 8 to 15 inches for the Lake Conroe watershed over the course of the event. And this is just that same graphic zoomed in. So this is the Saturday morning briefing, and it's still 8 to 15 inches estimated for Montgomery County, well, the Lake Conroe watershed, the north end of Montgomery County and above, because our watershed extends into Walker County. And then greater totals estimated for the Harris County and all of the areas south of us. At the 4 o'clock briefing on Saturday, they still were gradually increasing the rainfall estimates. You can see we're now in the 10 to 15 inches plus. So that area of high rainfall is creeping north as each briefing occurs. Just to show some of the radar images that were issued at that time, Saturday afternoon, and you can begin to see, and all of us experienced, frankly, the very, very heavy, rapid rainfall bands that began to move through the region. In terms of lake level, so operationally, staff was on alert, materials and fuel, et cetera, pre-positioned, essentially constantly throughout hurricane season, but certainly a week at least prior to this event. We entered this event with Lake Conroe at about 7 or 8 inches below its normal pool level. So we were 7 to 8 inches low prior to this rainfall event. And 201, the red line on the graphic, is the normal full pool elevation for Lake Conroe. And you can see the blue line, and that's the 26th, Saturday morning, 1 a.m. midnight of Friday night. That shows the rain. That's when the rainfall began. And you can see the lake begin to climb throughout the day on Saturday. And so we received 6 inches of rainfall on Saturday, and you can see the corresponding increase in lake level. We were able to continue. Basically, we're below 201, so we're not into operational protocol yet. But that was the rainfall and the reaction on Saturday. Now, Sunday, so this is the second day after landfall, the 27th. See the track of the hurricane. Obviously, our entire area is beginning all day Saturday and certainly Sunday morning, receiving extremely heavy rainfall amounts on Sunday. I circled the gauge. A gauge in Magnolia, Montgomery County, had already recorded 17.8 inches of rainfall. Here's another radar image from during the event. You can see the prediction. So this is the 4 o'clock briefing on Sunday, and that top left, that's saying several inches of additional rain still possible. So, they were tracking 4-6 inches plus in very short periods all day on Sunday. And then, of course, the rainfall prediction. This is the 5-day rainfall prediction that was issued, and still it's that 15 to 25 inch prediction additional from what had already occurred up through the 4 o'clock p.m. briefing on Sunday. In terms of lake level, this is the lake level reaction for essentially this graph shows Sunday and Monday. We received 13 inches of rainfall on Sunday. For comparison purposes, in the 1994 storm event, in that event total, our area received 13 to 15 inches of rainfall for that entire rainfall event in 1994. We received that on Sunday alone, after already receiving 6 inches on Saturday. So you can see the corresponding rise in lake level. We passed the 201 mark Saturday night, early Sunday morning. So you begin to get into the operating protocol phase where you begin to have to open gates, and I'll go over some of that later in the presentation. And you see that by the end of Sunday, the lake had risen 4.5 feet in that single day. Okay, going forward to Monday. This is the third day after landfall. It's the current track of Harvey. The heavy rain bands were beginning to move to the east, but still on Monday, rain bands were being created right in the Harris County area still, but a lot of the heavy bands that would swing out from the hurricane were moving towards the east. But even on Monday, this is the 11 a.m. briefing. Monday morning, we had received, remember, 6 inches Saturday, 13 Sunday. We're sitting down for the 11 a.m. briefing on Monday with the Weather Service, and they're still predicting an additional 6 to 10 inches of rainfall over the next 3 days. This was a radar image from the 4 o'clock briefing on Monday, and just to point out that there were notes like this: rainfall amounts 4 to 8 inches just that afternoon. And so there were bands still forming in the greater Houston region capable of producing extremely heavy rainfall amounts even on Monday. The rainfall predictions that they issued at this time, this was for Monday night and Tuesday. You began to see a little bit of reduction. We were predicted to have 1 to 4 inches through Tuesday. But for the 3-day total, this is the Monday afternoon briefing. They're still predicting an additional 4 to 6 inches in the Lake Conroe watershed for the next 3 days. So on Tuesday, August 29th, Harvey was still out over the Gulf. It was gradually, very slowly, moving to the east. This was a radar image from the 11 a.m. briefing on Tuesday. Again, you can see the heavier rainfall beginning to move to the eastern side of Harris County and out in the East Texas. We received, as part of these briefings, again, lots of River Forecast Center update information. I just wanted to note, this was a note they inserted into their update that the discharge at Lake Houston, August 28th, they recorded at 6:30 p.m. approximately almost 400,000 cubic feet per second being discharged from Lake Houston, which surpassed the previous record set in 1994 in that storm event. Tuesday morning at the morning briefing, 10 a.m., 11 a.m. I guess, we were beginning to see slightly reduced rainfall estimates for the remainder of the event. So at this time, you can see we're basically in that 3 to 6 inch, we're in the, half-inch to 2-inch rainfall band at that point. So less than 2 inches predicted at that point. This is for a 2-day forecast in the Tuesday morning briefing. So less than 2 inches predicted for the remainder of the event. On Wednesday, August 30th, this is the 5th day after landfall. The event had basically, in terms of rainfall, the event had essentially passed in our region. Weather Service began compiling rainfall totals for the event throughout Harris County. I'm going to zoom in a minute on that rainfall total graphic on the left, and then the graphic on the right from the River Forecast Center showing the various basins that were still at major or record flood stage at this point in the event. And then here is the zoomed in version of that rainfall graphic. So we all know the totals. I mean, we had 40 to 50 inches in southeast Harris County, just an extremely large area of over 20 inches of rainfall. But just the size and magnitude of the rainfall in this event and the geographic area that it covered was enormous, unprecedented. And just to sort of expand on that point, I want to compare this rainfall event. So if you if you think about this 20-plus zone, so all of the dark, kind of purplish blue area, that's 20-plus inches. I want to compare that to Tax Day and Memorial Day. So if you'll kind of keep that image in your mind, this next image is the Tax Day event from 2016. In this event, these couple of white areas in the graphic represent areas of 15 inches or better. So even though Tax Day was an enormous rainfall event and produced a tremendous amount of flooding, you can see the areas of the concentrated heavy rainfall were not nearly as extensive as in Harvey. And this event was essentially a West Harris County and west through Austin County and west of there was the shape of this event on Tax Day, and you can kind of see the different rainfall areas. And then if you go to Memorial Day, in this event, the white blocks on the graph are areas where the rainfall exceeded 20 inches. But again, the areas with rainfall totals over 20 were geographically a fairly small area. Now, Spring Creek, Cypress Creek, Lake Creek, all of the basins on this western portion of Montgomery County received very, very high rainfall totals on Memorial Day, but the geographic extent of those rains was not nearly what was experienced in Harvey. Now, in terms of how that impacted our basin, how Harvey rainfall totals impacted the basin, we've produced this peak flows map. Basically, all of this data is pulled from the USGS stream gauges that are throughout the basin. So each of these data points can be verified on the USGS website. You can look back at the historical data and see the totals at each of the gauges. And the point of this graphic is just to demonstrate, I didn't mark on here which basins set new records, but I can assure you they were all or nearly all at or above record levels. And so starting with Cypress, you had 28,000 cubic feet per second at the Cypress gauge, and the little blue raindrops are the rainfall totals for those areas. And every one of these watersheds are part of the Lake Houston watershed. Every one of these basins flows eventually into Lake Houston. You had Spring Creek at almost 83,000 cubic feet per second, and then I'll just bring in the other basins. And this isn't all of the tributaries that feed into Lake Houston. This is really the major tributaries that feed into Lake Houston. And you had 130,000 cubic feet per second in the West Fork at Porter. So this is right before the confluence. This area is the confluence between the West Fork of the river and Spring Creek and Cypress Creek. Now, in terms of Lake Conroe, during this event, we estimated from the measurements taken at the lake 130,000 cubic feet per second as the peak inflow into Lake Conroe. The peak release rate during the event was 79,000 cubic feet per second. And I'll touch in a little bit in some more detail on how that peak inflow coming into the lake is reduced as it passes through the reservoir. Just a quick comparison of some of the various the record events here at Lake Conroe, just to put these in perspective. I'm just showing here the peak lake level in the first column, the peak release rate, and then the rainfall rate. By the way, I meant to mention at the beginning of all this PowerPoint will be available on our website after the board meeting today for anyone that would like a copy of it. So you can see the lake level and release rate for Harvey in the top row, and that was based on measured over 22 inches of rainfall in the Lake Conroe watershed, 13 inches as I mentioned earlier on Sunday. You can see how that compares to the 94 event. So 94, the lake rose to 205.6, slightly over 4.5 feet over the normal pool level, had a peak release of 33,000 cubic feet per second with 13 to 15 inches of rainfall during that event. Memorial Day and Tax Day are also noted on here. And if you recall, the Tax Day rainfall really was sort of centered around Harris County and west. So the Lake Conroe watershed didn't receive nearly as much rain, well, 7.5 inches of rainfall on Tax Day. So you can see our release was very low in the Tax Day event. Memorial Day, 9.5 inches, and higher lake level, higher release. And the other thing that's not captured in this graphic, the lake level and the release rate depend highly on the duration and the intensity of the rainfall. And I didn't attempt to try to capture that on this graphic, but how fast the rain falls and runs into the reservoir has a tremendous impact on how the reservoir reacts. So that's basically a summary of the rainfall event. Now I want to touch on just some of the key points regarding the operations of the dam, how it works, and I'll do that by walking through a few of sort of the answers to some of the commonly asked questions that we received during all of the major storm events, and especially Harvey. This is just an overview of the dam. The embankment's a little over 2 miles long, and the spillway, the overflow spillway gates are here in the middle, and we have an additional release point, but this is a low flow release outlet, service outlet for releasing low flows to downstream customers. So the first point, we were frequently asked, why didn't you just hold the water back, or why did you open the gates at all? I mean, that's been a common question. So I'll basically walk through and explain that Lake Conroe is a water supply reservoir. It is designed essentially to operate at a full level. You want to keep the lake as full as possible, as long as possible. The goal is to store water for water supply purposes. Now that's compared to a flood control reservoir like Attucks or Barker, where the reservoir is designed to basically stay empty and leave a lot of storage space to capture inflows during a storm event. So what that means is water supply reservoirs have very little freeboard, very little space, and I'll show those in some graphics in a minute. Very little space to capture inflows. They are designed to basically pass inflows that come into the reservoir during a storm event. That's how they're designed. Now structurally, a Tainer Gate reservoir like Lake Conroe is designed so that you release the water from underneath the spillway gates. They are not designed to allow water to flow over the top of the spillway gate. So here's a picture of the spillway from downstream, looking back up at the gates. Each gate is 40 feet wide and 30 feet high. You can see this is a previous image showing water flowing under the gates. This is a close-up picture. Now we're looking at the downstream and upstream side of the Tainer gates. And the point of this, the primary point, is to show where the top of the water surface falls. So if you're looking at the upstream side of the gate, when the dam is at, or the reservoir is at the normal full level, there's about 18 inches of space between the water level and the top of the gate. That's the freeboard that remains when the lake's at 201, or normal surface elevation. And you can see if you transfer that line to the backside just to show it from this direction, that's about the 18-inch point. That's about where the water level falls when the lake is at normal pool elevation. So to kind of demonstrate what you're dealing with in a storm event, you start the event basically full. We were 8 inches low in this event, but at some point in an event, you're going to reach your full level, and you've got that 18 inches of freeboard. In this event, in Hurricane Harvey, we have passed over 15 feet of lake level. So all of the rainfall and the inflows into the reservoir resulted in an additional 15 feet of water on the reservoir. So there's no option to not open the gates. If you don't open the gates, that wall of that water will flow over the top of the gate, and structurally that is not how they're designed. They're not designed to sustain that type of pressure of sheet flow over the top of the gate. But if you didn't open it, the water is going through the reservoir whether you open the gates or not. So there's simply no option to not open the gates. That's not how a water supply reservoir operates with a Tainer Gate system. Now, just another way to look at that, this is that same image on the left with the gates closed at normal level. And then as the water rises, you have to gradually open the gates to keep the top of the gate above the level of the water. You do allow the lake level to rise. During an event, the reservoir is designed to allow the lake level to rise temporarily during a storm event, which mitigates, it actually reduces the peak flow going through the reservoir, which I'll show in some graphics in a moment. But then that lake level, after the peak of the event passes, the level gradually drops back down and you can gradually lower the gates back down. Now the next point I want to make about Lake Conroe, we've obviously heard numerous questions and claims that the Lake Conroe causes flooding. That's simply not the case. Water supply reservoirs like Lake Conroe, even though they are not designed for flood control purposes, do actually mitigate the peak flow of an event as it passes through the reservoir. That's possible due to the operating buffer that the lake is assigned. Now for Lake Conroe, that's a 6-foot zone. At the time the lake was constructed, there was a 6-foot easement purchased around the reservoir that allows the lake level to go up and down 6 feet during a storm event for operational purposes. The operating protocols for how the spillway gates are operated are designed basically to balance the inflow with and lake level with releases. So the computer is calculating throughout the event how much water is currently coming into the reservoir. You've got 6 feet to work with, and you've got to safely pass the peak flow through the reservoir while lowering the flow as much as possible. So for this event, one of the ways to show that graphically is to compare some of these hydrographs. Now this black line is the flow rate at I-45. This is the West Fork of the San Jacinto River at I-45. And this is a measure of the flow rate at that location over time. So you can see the peak flow at I-45 was just under 120,000 cubic feet per second. The blue line is the discharge from the Lake Conroe Dam. Now this is measured basically about a mile downriver at Highway 105. That's the blue line. Now, at this point, that's the 78,000 cubic feet per second. That relates to the peak discharge from the dam. The peak inflow, if the dam had not been here and had not operated as it's designed to operate, the peak inflow into Lake Conroe was 130,000 cubic feet per second. That's the flow that would have gone down the river if the Lake Conroe Dam were not in place, operating as it's designed to operate according to its protocol, and using that 6-foot flowage easement to buffer the flows going downstream. So the difference basically is that amount of water that's temporarily detained in Lake Conroe and allowed to be released over several weeks or months after a storm event. Another graphic just to demonstrate that effect. This is more hydrographs from the event. So the two dashed lines are Cypress Creek and Spring Creek. Those are the flows at Cypress Creek and Spring Creek at the gauges measured by the USGS. The solid lines, the yellow is Lake Creek. The blue is the discharges from the dam measured at Highway 105. And then the orange is the flow at I-45, and the green is the flow at Porter. So this is basically going downstream as you add basically Lake Creek and the discharges from the dam combined together, and then you pick that flow up at I-45 and eventually at Porter. And again, if the Lake Conroe Dam had not been here, had not utilized the 6-foot flowage easement that it's designed for, then that is the comparison of the 130,000 cubic feet per second that would have flowed down the river and made the situation much worse downstream. All right, the next important point about Lake Conroe relates to all of the watersheds that eventually flow into Lake Houston. This graphic, and I'll zoom in a little bit in a minute, just shows the various watersheds in the entire greater Houston region. You've got Lake Houston here on the right-hand side. And the point of this is that the Lake Conroe watershed makes up approximately 10 to 20% of the total flows that eventually reach Lake Houston. So if you zoom in a little bit and just show basically the watersheds that feed into Lake Houston, you can see starting with Cypress Creek on the lower left, working your way around all the way to Loose Bayou on the east side. We get a tremendous number of calls also from people wanting to know, is the flooding at my location related to the releases from the dam? The water, all of the water in these watersheds, if the rain falls in the Spring Creek watershed, it flows into Spring Creek, down Spring Creek until it reaches the West Fork at the confluence, which is almost at Highway 59. So we provide these watershed maps so that we can answer these questions and explain to people that for Lake Houston, Lake Conroe watershed, which leaves Lake Conroe and flows down the West Fork, makes up about 10 to 20% of the total flows reaching Lake Houston. In the woodlands, west of I-45, the impact from the Lake Conroe releases is zero. The woodlands is on the Spring Creek watershed 15 miles upriver from the San Jacinto River and is not impacted by releases from Lake Conroe. There is a portion of the Woodlands, Harper's Landing, on the east side of 45 that is closer to the West Fork of the San Jacinto River and is impacted by flows from Lake Conroe. But Tomball, we received calls from Tomball. We received a number of calls from Wood Forest subdivision. These are in different watersheds uphill from the San Jacinto River, not impacted by flows from Lake Conroe. We also saw a news report on TV claimed that flooding in Plum Grove was related to releases from Lake Conroe. Not only is that not in the Lake Conroe watershed, it's not in the West Fork of the San Jacinto River, it's in the East Fork of the San Jacinto River. But we deal with these questions in every major storm event. Now, we do have other agencies in the state that are also helping to provide information and get information out there about how the watersheds work. And I want to play a clip from a video. This is from one of the press briefings at the Harris County Flood Control District related to the storm.
There are releases going on Lake Conroe, which do go into the West Fork of the San Jacinto River. We are expecting major to record flooding on the West Fork of the San Jacinto River. We will rival the October 1994 flood. But I want to be clear that the majority of the water that is moving down the West Fork of the San Jacinto River is from Spring and Cypress Creeks and Lake Creek, and it is only a very small fraction of Lake Conroe release getting to the West Fork at Humble. So the flooding on the West Fork of the river and potentially the flooding around Lake Houston, the majority of the water is not coming from Lake Conroe. And had Lake Conroe not been in place and been able to hold back some of this water, the flooding would be much, much worse on the West Fork of the San Jacinto River.
All right. So Jeff actually touched on both of the first 2 points. It's a small percentage of the overall flow, and Lake Conroe serves to reduce the downstream impact of rainfall events in the Lake Conroe watershed. And one more time, just to show this again, we've highlighted the peak flows in all of the basins, not all of the basins. There are still some smaller tributaries that feed into Lake Houston, but these are the major basins with stream gauges that flow into Lake Houston. Now, in terms of the impact at Lake Houston, this is the hydrograph showing the water level in Lake Houston. In this event, Lake Houston rose steadily at a rate of about 7 inches per hour over a 72-hour period. As was reported in one event incorrectly, there was no surge in the level of Lake Houston caused by the releases from Lake Conroe. That's simply not how flows work in this watershed. It's a very flat, our entire area is very flat, and the flows are very slow in all of these tributaries. So Lake Houston gradually rose throughout the event. In fact, the travel time for releases from Lake Conroe to reach Lake Houston is over 24 hours. One of the questions we received operationally related to the fact that the heavy rainfall and the rapid opening of the gates, some of that occurred during the night. I think it was midnight Sunday night. However, it's 24-hour travel time downriver, so that allows time for the river to respond. The flows have to gradually make their way, and that's when the notifications are able to take place. All right, the next key point, now this really relates to upstream of the Lake Conroe Dam. At all times during the event, Lake Conroe water level remained within the authorized flowage easement. As I mentioned earlier, when the dam was constructed in the late 60s and early 70s, in addition to acquiring the property for the footprint of the reservoir, the River Authority also acquired a 6-foot flowage easement around the perimeter of the reservoir. This is recorded in the deed records for all the properties. It allows the properties up to 207 feet mean sea level to be inundated during operations of the dam. In this event, the peak level was 206 1/4, so we stayed within the flowage easement. Here's the graph showing the level during the event, and I've marked in red the flowage easement for Lake Conroe of 207 feet. So I want to just demonstrate that in a few additional graphics. Just from a a picture standpoint, just to try to get an understanding of how a flowage easement functions. At a normal water surface elevation of 201, the water would hit the land at a certain point on the shore. Some distance uphill from the shoreline, and it varies depending on how flat the land surface is around the reservoir, you'll reach a contour of 207 feet above sea level. And then wherever that falls on the property, that is the area that can be inundated during a storm event. It's up to elevation 207. This is a copy of one of the actual flowage easement documents. It was pulled from the deed records. This is just a sample. Obviously, there are numerous copies of this for each property around the reservoir. And then this is a plat, one of the plats from Bentwater subdivision, and you can see we had to kind of blow up one portion of it. This is the portion in the plat that notes the flowage and inundation easement up to 207 mean sea level. So these are the various notifications that are provided for landowners that choose to purchase property around Lake Conroe. Now, probably one of the most frequent questions we received after this event was, why didn't you let water out of the reservoir prior to the storm event? I have several graphics that I'll use to demonstrate this point, but I'll summarize a few of those first of all. The primary reason we don't ever pre-release from Lake Conroe is because the highest likelihood is that we will make their flooding problems downstream worse by doing that. And I'll demonstrate that with a few different graphics, but it would take weeks to safely lower Lake Conroe's water level for a number of different reasons. And weather predictions simply are not accurate enough that far in advance to make any difference in Lake Conroe's water level. And in fact, when you're dealing with an event like Harvey, where you've got 15 feet of lake level that you have to pass, starting an event 1 or 2 feet below the normal pool level is not going to change the operational situation you're dealing with once you go over 201. So let me walk through a few of those things. First of all, we've made some estimates of, at various release rates, how much change does that make in lake level for a day's time? Now, to try to put this in perspective, 2,500 cubic feet per second, a release of 2,500 cubic feet per second would essentially fill the river downstream of the dam. There are some properties that are nearly impacted at 2,500 cubic feet per second. I wouldn't consider this a safe release rate. The river would stay in its banks, but it's essentially filling the river at many locations. At that release rate, you're only changing the lake level 3 inches per day. That's just one of the things that's hard to understand, is the size, the magnitude of a reservoir, the volume of water that's involved. The surface area of Lake Conroe is approximately 20,000 acres. It's a much larger reservoir than Lake Houston. And so even at a release rate of 2,500 cubic feet per second, we're only moving 5,000 acre feet out of the reservoir each day. That only moves the needle about 3 inches in a day. Now, that's certainly not a safe release rate prior to a storm event when you already know rainfall's coming. But if you back that amount down, even to 625 cubic feet per second, now you're only dropping the lake 3/4 of an inch a day. So to lower the lake level, even if we wanted to lower the lake just 2 feet prior to an event, which, as I mentioned, 2 feet low going into a 15-foot event, really doesn't help you. Once you'll fill up, you'll get to 201 and you still got 13 feet left to pass. It would take a month to lower the lake 2 feet. And now let's look at the forecast and let's see what sort of information we had going into this event. 6 days out from the landfall of this event, Harvey dissipated, basically became an area of low pressure just north of South America. And then 3 days prior to landfall, the remnants of Harvey, an area of low pressure, were centered over the Yucatan, and it was likely to redevelop into a hurricane. So it's not the 2 weeks ahead that we all knew we were going to get 40 to 50 inches of rain. Even 3 days out, we basically had a low-pressure area over the Yucatan Peninsula. And as I mentioned, with that much time, and at this time the forecasts were 4 to 8 inches of rain in the basin. So there's just no set of circumstances under which you can make a release that will make any impact on the ultimate storm operations. And just to recall some of those forecasts, here's Wednesday, 2 days prior to landfall. Lake Conroe's watershed is in the 6 to 10 inch rainfall zone south of us. In Harris County in Lake Houston, they're actually predicted to get heavier rainfall than we are here at the Lake Conroe watershed. If you go to 1 day prior to landfall, still Lake Conroe is in the 6 to 10 inch band, and Harris County now is 10 to 15 inches or greater predicted rainfall. There is no way you would send water down the San Jacinto River to Lake Houston under circumstances like this, or frankly under any circumstances, because you simply cannot predict where exactly the rain will fall, how much and how intense it will be. We've had rainfall events where there was flooding in the Woodlands, which is only 15, 20 miles south of here, and we had no rain at the Lake Conroe Dam. You would have to know precisely which watershed the rain would fall in a month or two ahead of time to make any significant impact in terms of a pre-release. That's why it's not done. We actually have a letter from the TCEQ that summarizes these same points. All right, the next point I want to cover relates to just emergency communications during a storm event. Throughout storm events, as I've mentioned before, it's a constant partnership with the emergency response agencies in both Harris and Montgomery counties. We do tabletop exercises periodically to work with and practice with our partner agencies on how we'll handle these events. The river authority's role in these events is to operate the dam and notify all of the emergency response and law enforcement agencies that we partner with of the releases from the lake real time as it occurs. We have no authority or ability to order evacuations, to control or manage any sort of evacuations or road closures, or to serve in an emergency response role. We partner with agencies that fulfill that role during a storm event. However, during events, we do provide real-time data throughout every storm event. So there's a number of locations that this information is made available. On our website, we always have a current conditions box at the top right of the homepage, but during storms, we add a large box at the top of the homepage. You're just seeing the very top of it here, that where we post up-to-date information as it becomes available, whether that's press releases, frequently asked questions, maps. We put the peak flow map out as the event is occurring, links to other useful information. But in addition to this, we have a publicly facing website. All of the data that we use during an event. This is rainfall totals throughout the basin from all of our gauges, lake level, release rate. All of the storm data that we monitor during an event is in this Contrail website. And that is a public-facing website. Anyone from the public can pull these dashboards up and monitor live the same information that we're monitoring throughout a storm event. In addition to that, we do produce press releases, receive some criticism from folks that, well, if this is all you put out, obviously that's not getting to people. Well, that's not all we put out. And also the purpose of these is we've got specific information we've got to get to media outlets. We rely on media outlets to take this information and push it to the broader general public that we can't possibly reach. We also provide it to elected officials, all sorts of local elected officials and cities and other entities, so that as their constituents call, they have up-to-date information throughout the event, and certainly they can always send them to our website. So just to summarize a few things, in hindsight, after looking at all of the data from this event and visiting with our engineers, the reservoir operations during this very unique and terrible natural catastrophe were run very effectively and in accordance with the engineered protocols for the dam. Now, to demonstrate that, in this event, the lake stayed within its flowage easement, but we basically used nearly every inch of that 6-foot flowage easement to let the lake level rise, which means that through the operation of the Lake Conroe Dam, we reduced the flow going down the West Fork of the San Jacinto River to almost the maximum extent possible for an event of this magnitude. So it was a very well-run, successfully run event. Another interesting bit of fallout from events like this is not the only major storm we've had in recent years. Over the last few years, there have been a number of major storm events that caused major flooding. And one of the conversations that's beginning to occur in our industry relates to the design of future reservoirs. There is now discussion in our industry about moving away from Tanner Gate dams like Lake Conroe. Let me explain what I mean by that. So if you take the Lake Conroe Dam, it could have been designed as a broad-crested weir, which is basically a long concrete flat overflow spillway with no gates. That would mean that whatever rainfall flows into the reservoir basically would pass through and flow over this large spillway with very little attenuation or reduction of the peak flow. So you would actually lose the benefit of reducing or mitigating downstream flows, but there would be no gates to serve as the target of misplaced blame. So the litigation and the misinformation that's arisen from major flooding events over the last few years has begun to cause reservoir owners and engineers to think about moving away from Tanner Gate dams. Now, personally, I believe Tanner Gates are the better approach operationally in terms of operational flexibility that they provide, and because of the flood mitigation that they accomplish. Even though it's not a flood control reservoir, they do reduce the peak flow going down the river and reduce downstream flooding. But it requires a tremendous amount of education to help people understand how they function. Now, finally, I just want to mention we have been contacted about participating in a number of studies and investigations to determine if more can be done to mitigate flooding in our region. Those types of studies have included things like additional basin modeling to get a better handle on the topography and the reaction of the rivers and streams to storm events, large-scale flood control projects, channelization of certain streams. There will be a lot of resources available following this event, and every idea certainly will be considered. And we have indicated that we look very forward to participating in any of these studies that we can help with. So that's the conclusion of my remarks, Mr. President, and I'll turn it back over to you for public comment.
Thank you, Jace. At this time on the agenda, this time is set aside for public input and comment. And just so that you understand how under the Texas Open Meetings Act we have to deal with public comment, it limits the ability of board members to respond or comment. And as such, board members typically are going to refrain from answering questions or something that you might have. Doesn't mean your comments are not welcome, and it doesn't mean that we don't respect your right to have them, and we do welcome them. So we will extend courtesy and respect to you, and we expect the same in return. Each speaker will give you up to 5 minutes to state your concerns or comments. This chair here at the dais is for anyone that wants to come up. I'd start off with the first person is, correct me if I'm wrong, Bernadette McElroy. Got it right, huh?
I wanted to copycat.
It's all right.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am here as a concerned community activist for River Plantation in which I live. I'm here to address, as a mother, as a grandmother, if my kids were sleeping on the floor with the constant flooding that is coming into River Plantation, you're doing it at the wrong hour. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. Children could have been drowning. That's what is happening in River Plantation to my notice. I think a woman around this table, if she gave you washing to do, all the engineers will go into that washer and say, should I put it on small, large, regular, extra large? Should I put it on permanent wash, heavy duty wash? Because a woman has common sense. All that information that you have shown up there, a woman would have taken that information, but she would have based it on her experience. And you guys have been on this board long enough to be able to take all that information from a computer, from everyone that have different ways of thinking. And you all should have put it together and use it as an experience. And I bet you if you have involved women into that, the women would have said, 5 days out, guys, we don't care. We can't predict the weather. We don't know what's going to happen. But by the time it's coming to Yucatan, let's not take a chance. Let's go ahead and stop dropping that lake gradually so that that line that you showed me coming up to the shore would have raised a little bit, maybe drop a little bit. When I came out, I would say, honey, we can't dock the boat today. They're dropping the lake so that no one can flood. It should have been ready that when that time comes, those 3 inches or the overflows and all that, it would have been ready to accommodate minimal effect on the homes. Maybe a foot could have gotten in, but to start tearing up sheetrocks all the way up to the 2nd floor, River Plantation has went under major flooding because no one has given that community a chance to rebuild itself. I got to see what happened for the first time last year. They had just got through rebuilding, and darn it, it came again. When you keep doing this, it affects 2 entities, the state of Texas, FEMA, the money we give, and a subdivision that is trying to exist and accommodate family and children. Now, we are going to be faced with a whole bunch of slabs sitting on our lots. That hurts us. It hurts the economy of Conroe. So guys, 2 things I'm asking for. The hours that you are doing this, you're going to have to figure out what time it's going to hit my subdivision so I don't have to hear, was there a death because a child was sleeping on the floor or sleeping as Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts in the backyard having their campouts? And the second thing, how is it affecting Conroe, its economy, and the state of Texas to rebuild? Because FEMA ain't going to give you all this money for Texas to rebuild from what happened. We have got to work together. And Judge Emmett would have said there was no community expectation. We did not get any information, so you all over the years are not communicating this information out. I feel very much strongly that you have to form a community committee and invite persons, please, no engineers. Invite the local grassroots to sit on this committee and you ask the questions and let us as mothers, as families, as fathers, workers, constructions, share with you the answer to the questions that you are wanting to gain experiences from the data you are collecting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, is there any question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker that's asked to come up is Mr. David Fannin.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for coming.
I'm president of Mud Board 42, which is located in Westlake subdivision, or Hills of Westlake, which is a new subdivision underneath the dam or spillway. I'm not in that capacity right now. I'm a citizen. I just want you to know what we experience being right under the spillway. First off, I have 3 items of interest you have that you might want to address and concern. On your agenda today, you're considering the rate orders for Woodlands Division customers in item number 8 and amending the rate order for raw water customers in item 9C. I would advise that you lower your rate order for both items. My reasoning in this recommendation is that on your comprehensive annual financial report dated August 31st, 2016, I assume that's the most recent one. It states on page 18 that SJR made a total operating revenue of $86,959,842. Of that, $67,391,878 was water and sewer service fees. The business ended the year with a profit or a change in net position of $2,829,369 for the fiscal year. So that negates any need for an increase of any water rates over last year's rate orders as it goes for the year 2016. I don't have the 2017 information of whether you've made a profit or not, but it seems like the rates for the surface water and pumpage fees are continuing to increase. You've cited legislation from 2016 and 2017 as the necessary increases. Yet your salaries and wages have increased from 2007 to 2016 in August to $11,724,348, which does not include the $4,715,723 in employee insurance and payroll benefits. That breaks down to you having 177 people employed per your financial report on page 89, and the average person gets paid per capita here at a state-appointed agency of $66,239.25. The Census Bureau says the median U.S. income is only $53,889, while the per capita income in Montgomery County is only $33,455. That means a worker at a state-appointed agency gets double the salary, and I didn't even include the benefits over everyone in this county. How does that explain rate order increases? I also found in your financial report that this board has slowly increased its payroll expenditures over 9 years to be 3.94 times higher than 2007. That's an increase from $2.9 million to $11.7 million in 9 years. Yet you keep raising the rate orders. And I have my bill, which I just got in September, and my water costs $34.50, my sewer costs $33, the TECQ costs 34 cents, the SJRA fee costs $42.75. It makes up 38.26% of my bill. And that's in September. That's with your new rate increases. It went from $2.85 to $3.15 per thousand, and I buy my water from Conroe, so it's a pass-through. Now I have people in my district that are on fixed incomes, they're single mothers, they're getting divorced. It's unacceptable. You should be lowering these rates, and you know why I know you should be lowering these rates? Because I have lowered my rates in my subdivision for over 10 years, except for 1 year where I got voted down. And my financial advisor is actually here on your board. I'm not going to point him out to embarrassing or anything, but we've been able to lower our rates for water and keep our costs down, and yet your costs keep increasing. And you got too many projects going on right now. The last thing is, I want you to know what our experience was in Harvey. We were woken up by a fire truck banging on our door, firefighters saying, get out, you have no choice to get out, at 5:15 in the morning. We evacuated my 5 kids, 2 cats, a dog, and we go all the way to Centerville, and we stay there. But there's no information on the website saying that y'all are going to release 131,000 cubic feet of water at night. I don't see how ramping up the release levels during the night hours provides for public safety when people have to evacuate during the darkest hours in the morning during black water conditions. It's dark that early in the morning. And we didn't get any notice ahead of time. There's hundreds of people that are under that dam that could have slept through the water and died. We had one fire truck come in and tell us. I had 2 86-year-old women across the street from me that didn't evacuate. They had to wait for another fire truck to come while the water was rising. And by the way, our lift station was totally underwater, and the water did not get into our homes, thankfully. So I thank God. But this is not right. We need a set, planned, tiered release of water out of the spillway in the event of any of these things going on. And I mean, I even looked up the data for the SJR. It says here that y'all use it says you guys use, and I got this data if anybody wants to see it, USGC 0806760 sensor, which is on Lake Conroe. I pulled up the data from August 24th, 2017 to September the 1st, 2017. It went up 5 feet in one full day, which y'all can collaborate or not collaborate. But then you pull up the data, and this is what it looks like. Y'all only went up to like August the 30th. You didn't show the mitigation of the water going from 2,006 feet when you released it at 131,000 cubic feet down to 203 feet in like 2 days. If you look at, put that same information into the USGC for May 23rd, 2016 to May 31st, 2016, which is exactly the same amount of time as this, 9 days, it shows that the lake level went up 3.5 feet in 1 day, and it's almost, the lake release is almost identical. That you guys released a bunch of water in a hurry on the night of the 28th. It was a bad decision. Y'all need to own it. And this is ridiculous that it looks exactly the same as Memorial Day and exactly the same as this event, and it's dropped the same amount in the same amount of time. You guys are not doing a good job for us. It's terrible.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fannin, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Next person requesting to speak is, I believe, is it Jamie Goodman?
We don't bite.
I get this way every time. My name's Jamie Goodman. I'm president of River Plantation. Excuse me if I'm emotional.
It's all right, take your time.
but I've been through a lot with these people. During Hurricane Harvey, the event, the River Plantation suffered immense damage. Over 500 homes were flooded. Many of these homes had not been flooded before. Previous floodings have been at least 100 to 137, but to have 500 was a catastrophe for us. While this was not the first time, it was the first time most of these homeowners had experienced this. I ask you, what am I to tell the woman that walks in my office that's 70 years old, that has lost everything? Her husband had just passed away. She had no flood insurance because she had never flooded. And she's asking me if she can walk away because she can't afford to rebuild. What do I tell the father that just bought the home, that he was his dream home for his 3 young children, who didn't evacuate, was stuck in the home up in the attic for 3 days because the water did not recede, and then they eventually figured out a way to get out with a ice chest and floated towards everyone so that they could get out. And the children were crying because they were hungry. I understand that you did what you thought you could do, you were supposed to do. But my question is what are you going to do to fix it? These people need help. FEMA's not going to help all of these people. They're being rejected because either they make too much money or they had insurance and they're having to wait to see if their insurance is denying them coverage. Some of it is being denied. They're being told that their houses had flooded before, but they didn't know anything about it because the real estate agents didn't tell them, so they're being denied coverage for that. These people need help, and we can't continue to do this. So I ask you, could you clean out the lake, make it deeper? What about the San Jacinto River? What has been done to fix that? I haven't lived here that long, but I feel a part of this community. And if you'd seen the devastation that I've seen, you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be crying too, because these people mean a lot to me. I spent 14 days straight, 12 hours a day, helping these people. We put together a relief command center with the help of our city commissioner, our county commissioner, Charlie Riley. He did a great job in helping us, and we were able to help many of these people, muck out their homes. We fed them 3 meals a day, and then we also helped 2 other communities that needed help that no one was helping them with. This was horrible, and the community feels that you guys have let us down, and so I wanted to let you know that. And I want to thank you for trying to, if you do, for trying to fix this, because we really need help here.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and our hearts go out to the people that have had damage. We've had people here on staff that have also been affected by this, so we understand and we appreciate your comments. Next person requested to speak is Robert McElroy.
Thank you, sir. My name is Robert McElroy. I also live in River Plantation.
Yes.
And I've got some, some disjointed thoughts, but some observations regarding what I've seen so far from my research. First of all, the name San Jacinto River Authority leads someone to believe, hey, we're in charge of the San Jacinto River Basin. That's right. That's what it makes you think. Well, then I got to thinking last night, well, how do y'all get your money? I didn't know anything. I live we get our water from groundwater, so I don't have to pay that exorbitant bill that other person described. But basically, you're a monopoly, and you're in charge of selling water and providing wastewater services. That's your primary mission. Secondly, is to provide for the lake and for the entertainment and recreational activities on the lake. That's your primary goal. And then one time I said, there's a Harris County flood control district. I said, wow, maybe is there one here in Montgomery County? I Google the name, and nothing comes up as a flood control district. But then again, I think, well, it's a San Jacinto River Basin. And I think, well, what should we do going forward? What should you as an organization do? Obviously, there's your mission. But then again, immediately, I would say lower the lake level to 195. There's an article on the internet from Texas A&M University that talks about the impact that could happen if you had a 195 lake level, or really they said 8 foot. But to me, to carry that lake level at 201, which anything above it, we can potentially flood. And I look at that number up there for the, what was it, May or tax day? 7-inch rain, and we flooded River Plantation. 7-inch rain. What's the likelihood of that happening again? I guarantee you it's pretty high in this area. You better count on it. And so there needs to be an engineering study to make sure you can lower that lake level and operate it at 195 with a 12-foot flowage easement and change your tidal work. And you would say, well, what about all the people that have boats and docks out here? Well, I'll tell them this. What about the 5,000 homes that people have been displaced and their businesses have been destroyed? And so you look at that and say, well, boat owner, or you get out there and you dig your dock and you dig down 6 foot and that water come back in. Or you can move that dock further out in the lake and you can still use your boat. Or you can put a floating dock out there. And you say, well, there's going to be some economic impact because of the revenue loss and the tax for the county. Yeah, that's true. But there's also revenue loss in property value because there's an article in the Conroe Courier about 50,000 homes being reviewed by MCAD for reducing the appraisal rate, the appraisal values. So that's the immediate thing. But long term, you as an organization, what can you do? You can promote a San Jacinto River Basin Flood Control District. Notice I didn't say county. It's the whole river basin. It's Spring Creek, Lake Creek, everything in that whole map that you showed up there. And why do I say that? Well, you go down and you look at every day I drive down the service road on 45 going into River Plantation. I look out there and I see that river. I mean, there's so much trees and debris in that river basin, you wouldn't believe. How can water ever get through there? How can we move water into the river basin, move water into Lake Houston downstream? And you look at that winding, snaky river. Anybody knows every twist and turn in every one of these creeks and rivers around here is going to add resistance to moving water through. That river needs to be widened, it needs to be deepened, and you need to have a grade going down. And by taking out that snake, you can improve your grade, your downslope, going into Lake Houston. And then now there's a lot of money coming around, available. And I think I'd be on the door of FEMA and ask for $2 billion to, one, start downstream and dig out Lake Houston, because the mayor's already said it's filled with silt for the last 50 years, and dig that lake out. And then work upstream and get that canal going. Make it a San Jacinto River Canal, not a river anymore, because we know, I live in River Plantation. I can take you into River Plantation and show you where there's 16 feet of sand because of the way that river's moved, and that with Stewart Creek as well. So I think there's some things you need to think about long term. We've talked about what's happened, but talk about what you can do as an organization. First of all, is drop that lake level. And don't wait for the next flood, because you already said we can't lower it in time, because it'll take us weeks and months. But yet you showed that you can do it in 1 day's time, you can drop the lake level. And then I also read too, there's the medallion program. What the medallion program is, y'all familiar with that? 39 medallions have been awarded. For what? Cleaning out storm sewers so you can have improved flowage into the lake. And so I ask, is this really a retention pond for all the subdivisions they're putting in concrete and cutting down pine trees? It's going to get worse, gentlemen. 10 years from now, you're looking at 200,000 CFS moving in that lake unless you do something about it. Those are my comments. I appreciate you listening, and hopefully there's some action you can take with what I've presented here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the public comment from the list I have. Is there anyone else that had a comment that? All right. I appreciate your coming here. I appreciate your input. I wish we would have time to have open discussion, but not allowed. And appreciate your suggestions. And if you would like to have more information specific to your questions, staff would be glad to address those at your convenience. So, again, appreciate you coming in. We have a lot of compassion for the circumstances of this historic event. And so appreciate the fact that there are people that are community-oriented and interested in solutions to problems they face. And I'm thankful there are people like that out there. So with that, we will move on with the agenda. Next item is division updates. And I'll turn it over to General Manager Jace Houston.
All right. Thank you. We will move on to division updates. The only division update we have this month is under G&A related to financial administration, and our financial advisor is going to give us an overview, a little presentation on a potential refinancing opportunity. I'll turn it over to you, Ryan. Go right ahead.
Alrighty. So as Jace mentioned, there is, as part of our ongoing responsibilities for the authority, we monitor your outstanding debt and look to see when interest rates reach a point where there might be an opportunity to refinance the outstanding debt to produce debt service savings. There is such an opportunity for some of the raw water enterprise bonds that are currently outstanding. There is a presentation at your place. There's actually, they look kind of similar, but if you look for the one that actually says San Jacinto River Authority Raw Water Enterprise, says potential refunding. We refer to it as a refunding. It's, as Jay said, it's a refinancing. It's just the common terminology we use is we call it a refunding. So if you flip past the cover page, there's a chart here that talks about the bond buyer's 20 bond index. This index is, you can kind of think of it as the Dow Jones Industrial Average for municipal bond, the municipal bond market. Gives you an idea of the overall trends within the municipal bond rates and municipal bond market. This shows the last 30 years, so it's quite a long history here. And over the last 30 years, the average rate of that index is a 5.2%. Current rate's about 3.6%. So very, very low interest rate environment, which is part of the reason why this opportunity presents itself. So flip past that, we get to the summary of assumptions that we used in analyzing this opportunity. The assumed date-to-date delivery, which just means that when we could be able to close on the bonds, given where we are in time and how long it would take to get the bonds to market and prep and all that. We'd be looking at closing the bonds sometime in December, middle of December, December 12th. Current structure of the bonds outstanding for the raw water enterprise have principal payments in October, semi-annual interest payments on April and October as well. So all that's consistent. That pledge of the authority, so this is your raw water enterprise, so this is all the raw water that gets sold downstream of the Highlands, in the Highlands division. That pledge is rated by S&P at a AA-, which is a very strong credit. Highest credit available will be AAA. Doesn't happen all that often. And then AA+, AA-. Again, a very strong credit, and it's something that would actually be very favorably received in the market by underwriters and investors. And so interest rates that we received, so we did solicit rates from prospective underwriters, and based on those results, we asked for rates as of last Thursday. So these are live market rates, or as close to live market rates as we can get as of a week ago. There's about $18.7 million worth of bonds that are outstanding that would produce significant savings based on those interest rates. And so the average coupon on those bonds is about a 4.17%. If you flip to page 4 of the presentation, this is where we get into the refunding analysis. I like to think this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the actual presentation and the refunding opportunity here. So as I mentioned, there's about $18.7 million of bonds that are outstanding that would produce significant savings. If we issued just over $17 million in bonds to refinance those bonds, we could take that average interest rate of 4.17 down to 3.16. So you could produce almost a full point in interest rate savings, and that 3.16 reflects all of the cost of issuance and everything associated with getting the bonds to market. The rest of this, the negative arbitrage, so the bonds that we're looking at are actually would be what we call an advance refunding. What that means is that the bonds are not actually callable until 10/1 of 18, so October 1 of 18, so they're not actually, couldn't actually redeem them until about a year from now. But in the interim, we would sell, when we sold the bonds, we'd take a portion of the proceeds, invest those proceeds in state and local government securities that would earn some interest until that point. And so there's an opportunity cost in that the amount of money that we can earn on those investments in that short period of time does not equal the amount of interest that we'd be paying on the bonds that are outstanding. However, because the rates are so low, that cost is more than offset through the reduced interest rates that we'd be paying on the new bonds. So the total gross savings that we would receive if everything was exactly as we assumed here would be about $1.76 million in debt service. That results in, when you present value that back based on your borrowing rate, brings it down, the percentage of savings is 6.86% roughly. Anything above 3% is something that we would consider at least worth pursuing, or at least looking into. When we start getting up into the 6.5–7% range, you're looking at a very strong refinancing opportunity, in our opinion. So that's why we're bringing that to you today. The rest of the pages here go in a little bit more detail about the proposed pricing on the refunding bonds. What page 6 has the proposed debt service savings summary here. If you look, if you flip to that page, you can see on the far right-hand side we've got the savings column there. You'd be saving, once we get into the actual principal amounts of the bonds that we're refunding, you'd be saving almost $110,000 a year on the debt service for these particular bonds. And then lastly, on page 7 is the estimated sources and uses, showing the bond proceeds coming in, and then also where all that money would be going. Obviously, the majority of the money that would be produced by the sale of the bonds would go into that escrow account that we mentioned to purchase the investment instruments that would then be used to repay or redeem the outstanding bonds. So, really, it's just more to bring this to your attention. Like I said, we've solicited some interest rates from underwriters. Our plan would be, if you guys are amenable to it, to come back to your next meeting with a preliminary official statement, which is the offering document that would be used to market the bonds, as well as bring back to you the results of a RFP for underwriters, so that we can help you make a selection on who would actually go out and market the bonds for you. That, I'll open it up for any questions.
You reissue the new paper with the same term, in terms of payoff
Yes.
terms as the old?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you're not lengthening the...
No lengthening of the debt, so the final maturity of the bonds that we're refunding would be the same as the
Yeah,
bonds
okay.
that we're issuing.
Second, it seems like an oversimplification, but since they're not redeemable for a year, and it's gonna cost you money between issuance and the redemption, that's all a matter of analyzing the risk of the rate.
Right, so because it's an advance refunding, if interest rates were to stay exactly where they are for the next year,
You wouldn't
no
do it.
movement at all.
Right.
No, you would actually realize slightly more savings if you waited until the call date.
Right.
But the risk that you're running is that interest rates do rise between now and then.
I
It's a
just
bird in
wanted
the
to
hand
make sure
versus
I understood
two in the
that.
bush kind of thing, right?
Why force it today?
Right.
It's all a matter of the risk of his rates going up from now,
Right.
which most people suggest that there's probably only one direction it's gonna go. How much, we don't know, but
Right.
Yeah,
certainly
then
not
that-
gonna go down.
And that is the interplay that you're
Okay,
balancing.
thank you.
We've been pretty good at making these calls, I think, over the years on timing, on
Right.
getting.
Yeah, because it's been going down.
And to Fred's point, that negative arbitrage percentage, that's kind of what that's measuring, is how much you're kind of giving up. And if it's less than 25%, in which in this case, I think it's 12%, it's a pretty
I think
efficient
it-
refunding, really.
And a good opportunity.
You said it's a gross savings.
So gross savings, I say that because it hasn't been present value back. The gross savings is actually net of all of the fees and expenses associated with getting the
Okay,
bonds to
so
market.
that's
So
true
that is true savings that you would get. That's actual dollar savings after the bonds are refunded. So all of the cost of issuance associated with the new bonds would be rolled into the principal amount of those new bonds. So it's kind of like you could think of it as kind of like a zero closing cost mortgage. Once you close on the bonds, you just start realizing the savings, that your payments just get lowered. There's no out-of-pocket expenses associated with it. It's all rolled into the deal.
Any other questions?
So right now, there's no action today. You continue to work on this over the next month and bring back a package next month.
Right. The only thing I'd like to add is, if for some reason the market would change and this is not as attractive next month,
it hasn't cost the board anything. You know, this is really a transaction that's on a contingency basis, and so we'll continue to move forward until we actually sign up the deal. But up until that point, there's no risk or cost to the authority.
There are no further questions for them. We appreciate that. That's all the division updates we have for this month. We'll move on to the consent agenda. As usual, you've had your packet, you've seen the items on the consent. Anything you'd like to be moved, we'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion on the consent? A second. Got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign?
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Moving on to the regular agenda, item 7A. We have our fiscal year 2018 operating budget. As you know, we worked through this beginning in February, March. We presented it to the committee, Finance Committee. We presented it to our customer committees, Woodlands and GRP, have both approved their portions of the operating budget. And we handed this out in July. And so we received just a couple of comments. We've incorporated those. Really, we received no other comments. So and we've presented it in detail at a budget workshop. So at this point, unless there are further questions or concerns, staff would recommend approval of the operating budget. We would certainly entertain any questions.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
A motion. I'll second that. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Carried.
Thank you very much. Move on to 7B, which is Woodlands. We have basically three construction projects and then some special project revenue bonds, and we can take these in chunks. So B1 and 2 both relate to a lift station rehab. I'm going to let Ron present these to you.
Yeah, lift station number 5 is a lift station that was built in 1982. As we go through our asset management plan, looking at prioritizing work, this is the next one that's in line. It also ties in with our wastewater master plan. We've received offers from 4 contractors. The highest point was awarded to Black Castle, and the cost is $751,643. And the engineer's estimate was actually $1.3 million, is one of those that actually come in on the good side. So we would recommend approval of the construction contract with Black Castle Inc. And also, item 6B2 is the construction phase services with ARC engineers. They were the design engineers for this rehab. To authorize them in the amount of $23,318.70 for construction phase services during the construction of this rehabilitation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
That's 7B1 and 2.
Discussion. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
A
Second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Carried.
All right. Ron, you can go ahead with those next 3.
7B3, 7B4, and 7B5. This is elevated storage tank number 4. It's a 750,000 gallon tank constructed in 2000. We did a follow-up inspection earlier this year to confirm that it needs some rehabilitation. Basically, we're going to paint the tank inside and out. And so we received 7 proposals on this, and the highest point getter was NG Painting at $448,000. Also, we have 2 work orders with Dunham Engineering. Item 7B4 is the work order number 6 for the construction phase services part of the work. And then item 7B5 is with Dunham Engineering is the inspection services, because they provide the specialized inspection to go up on the tank and make sure that it's the right thickness and the right type The construction phase services contract with them is $10,487.50. And the inspection work order is $26,000. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
The technology, you know, in my business, you paint things and you have different paint and technology and cleaning specs and everything. Is that our spec or is that the contractor's spec? Do they propose their own?
No, it's our spec.
Our spec?
It's our spec.
So they're bidding it to meet our spec?
Yes.
Okay. Given events of the last year in terms of these people we're paying to inspect things, have we thought or considered the, what's the word I'm looking for? Are we still comfortable with what we're paying for and liability and review and everything? Mitch, I don't know if that's something for you or whatever, but, I mean, if we're paying them, we expect them to be accountable and we expect them to be able to stand up if they make a mistake too.
Correct.
Did we have a couple bad apples or are we trying to narrow our contractual arrangements down?
Well, one thing is on this inspection, this is truly a unique type of inspection, you know, getting up on the tank and testing the paint thickness and
Yeah.
type, which is a little different than some of the other
I understand.
items you're talking about.
I'm
Mitch?
more of it in general comment,
Okay,
I guess,
okay.
on that thing.
In terms of some of the existing issues we've had that are ongoing with
Yeah.
our inspection services, I would just say that that's a matter that we'll discuss in closed session. There has been, there have been discussions with the contractor, and I expect that.
Yeah, that wasn't, I'm not trying to manage the past issues more than going forward. Do these contracts need to be tuned up a little bit? But in this situation, you're saying, this is a very specific, they're doing paint thickness tests and adhesion and everything else, so it's not really an issue here.
Well, and there's one comment I can't make on that, and that is the Texas legislature has amended the standards that you can apply to professional services rendered by an agency.
Oh, okay, okay.
We don't have a whole lot of leeway to adjust their standards.
Okay, well, I understand that. Thank you, sorry.
That's a good question. Around the 448,000 was awarded, what was there an engineer around?
500.
Okay. And the firm was,
NG Painting, which we've had experience with in the past, and they've done a good job.
I just got one other follow-up question. I appreciate you answering my questions the other day. He brought up a question that I forgot to ask, and that is, I know we have our own spec, but, so it's two-part. How long do we expect this to last? What kind of things did we look at that would either affect the lifetime of the internal painting?
Well, when you say last, the construction lasts?
No,
4 months.
duration of before you have to do it again.
Well, the last time this was done was in 2000, so I would say 15, 20 years.
So we're not doing anything to affect that. We're pretty much the technology we're using is 15, 20
It
years.
should last 20 years, but
Okay. And there's no other newer technology out there?
not for this type of painting system.
but from your pre-bid inspections, you're not expecting structural damage or having to repair girders and
Well, there are some pit repair and some other items like that we're going to have to do. It's not just painting. There are some areas that we're going to have to do some metal repair, but it's really minor. And what we try to do in all these paint jobs is to get and identify them before it gets to the point where we have some major rehab that we have to do.
All right, any further questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to, 7, 3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, and 5.
So moved.
Got a motion? I'll second that.
Ronnie seconded.
Yeah.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
All right, we're still in the Woodlands. We have a disinfection system improvement project. That's 7B6 and 7. Ron.
7B6 and 7B7. Currently, at wastewater treatment plant number 2, we have a UV disinfection system. At plant number 1, we use chlorine gas, and we also do at plant number 3. The UV system at plant 2 has been at best troublesome to operate and maintain over the last decade or so. It's been a challenge. And so and it's near the end of its life. It was originally installed in 2003. So it was time to look for either putting in a different or new UV system or going to a different type of disinfection system. And after a lot of discussion and a lot of analysis and a lot of review, we've decided to recommend going back to the chlorine gas system that we have at plants 1 and plant 3. It's more consistent with our other systems. And as you know, the difference between the chlorine gas system is it kills the items that are in the wastewater, whereas in UV it basically neuters it. And so we've decided and suggested to go with chlorine. We understand the issues and concerns about chlorine gas system or any kind of gas systems. Gas systems, all the containers and systems and metering systems are all contained inside a building. It's all scrubbed in case there are releases. We have set procedures for our staff for going in the buildings and doing switch out between the cylinders. And so we feel this is a very safe system that we have. And so we've gone with that. We received 3 proposals. The highest points were awarded to industrial, and their cost was $5,995,500. It'll take about a year to finish this construction. And if I may, also 7B7, Corolla Engineers was the design consultants for this project, and we're recommending a work order number 3 for them in the amount of $184,015.10 to provide the construction phase services portion of the work. And we will be providing the inspection ourselves. We will be providing construction management and inspection. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the capacity of this number 2, do you divert that to the other 2 stations while you're rebuilding, or do you build the new one alongside of it?
We're going to build a new one beside it, and then when the new one is in place.
Switch, just
Right.
on off. Okay, thank you.
Right.
These are items that are actually funded out of the woodland.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just for,
Yes, sir. It's out of our R&R fund that the Woodlands is set up to pay for these kind of
right.
maintenance replacement costs.
All right. Questions? I'll entertain a motion on
Make a motion to approve 7B, was it B, 6 and 7?
6 and 7, yes, sir.
correct. Got a motion?
Second.
A second. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. 7B8.
Mitch, are you doing 8 and 9?
So I will take items 7B, 8, and 9, and just to provide a little bit of historical context, the Woodlands Division has been working with its customers, the Woodlands Muds, for years now, looking at ways to implement capital improvements programs and to really bring needed repairs and major rehabilitations to the woodland systems in a cost-effective manner. And I would say that in general, we've rolled out a very successful program with the Woodlands Muds, where we've implemented a program to cash finance capital improvements on a year-over-year basis. But for certain major wastewater system improvements, cash financing posed a major problem. The capital improvements plan recommended the rehabilitation of the Bear Branch gravity main, which was an extensive project, and I'll let Ron weigh in on some of the cost in just a moment. But aside from the Bear Branch gravity main, there were also some improvements needed at our wastewater treatment plant. So in discussing the need for these repairs with the MUDs and options available, we discovered that these projects may be appropriate to go to the Texas Water Development Board and request financial assistance through the state revolving fund. So the state revolving fund is a program where the federal government provides subsidies to the Texas Water Development Board so that they can make low-interest financing available to eligible projects. So the SJRA put together an application. Actually, we started in a pre-application process, filed it with the Water Development Board. The Water Development Board approved it and asked us to come back and submit a full application. We did that. And in July, that application was finally approved for up to $43 million in financial assistance through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund for implementing the major repair and rehabilitation projects to the Woodlands wastewater system. So the principal projects, like I said, involve the replacement or the rehabilitation of the Bear Branch gravity main and certain improvements to the processing facilities at our wastewater plant. Ron, do you want to provide any kind of color commentary on the size of those?
Yeah, the three, like Mitch was saying, the three together is estimated to be about $43 million. The Bear Branch interceptor project, which preliminary design has been completed, somewhere in the $12–15 million range. We have a project where we're replacing a belt filter press and building, and we're adding a belt filter press. The new added belt filter press is part of another funding, but the building and the replacement of that is part of this bond funding. And then the last item is our aeration basins that we're going to have to, they're beyond their service life, and we're basically going to remove them and replace them and make them bigger. Again, it's another part of making it bigger is funded through their capacity charges. What's coming out of the bond is just to replace what's there. And those three, as Mitch said, added together conservatively is $43 million. And this has been a long process of discussions with the MUDs that has been over almost 2 years in discussions to get to this point. But they've all agreed to pay for these three specific projects that are basically maintenance or rehabilitation rehab projects using this funding method.
So that's...
And if I may add, we've been able to do this by keeping both the water supply rate and the waste disposal rate at the same as it was last year with no increase.
So that was one important takeaway as we roll into the particular agenda item. So 7B8 is the adoption of a rate order for the Woodlands Division customers. So this is a rate order that applies only to the Woodlands MUDs. And in the past, when we have gone to the Woodlands MUDs and asked them to approve our rates each fiscal year, it's typically been done at the WJPA meetings, and it was never set out in a full rate order adopted by this board. But since we are proceeding to issue debt secured in part by the revenues payable from the MUDs, we need to evidence the adoption of that rate being imposed on the Woodlands customers in a more formal manner. This will be an item that goes in the transcript of documents that would go to the Texas Attorney General when they review the bond issue proceedings. So 7B8 is to consider adoption of a rate order for our Woodlands Division customers. The backup has been provided, and as Ron noted, this is no change in the rates themselves. And the Woodlands customers have all approved this rate. This is simply reducing it into a formal rate order that we can include in our documents. I'd be happy to answer questions.
So for these Water Development Board bonds, what kind of criteria are you, I assume they're less than market rate because they're by the state?
Yes, so there's a federal subsidy that gets applied, and Jan and Ryan will go through actually how well we did in receiving that subsidy. But the subsidy is based in part on the creditworthiness of our pledge. So we've got a very strong credit put up for these bonds because it's all based on the credit of the underlying Woodlands muds. We've done very well with demonstrating a history of the creditworthiness of the Woodlands customers, and so I believe it's fair to say S&P looked at that creditworthiness and applied it to this bond issue, and it really paid dividends in terms of the rates we received.
All right, questions? All right, I would entertain a motion on 7B8, which is the adoption of the rate order for the Woodlands, and 9, which is the,
We'll get to that in a second. Just 78.
all right, we're going to do them separate? Okay, well, you had to, all right, we're just 7B8 by itself, that's the rate order.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now 7B9.
Okay. So, as I discussed earlier, our application to the Texas Water Development Board for financial assistance was approved. So now we're starting on the steps towards actually taking out this financial assistance from the Water Development Board. And the way that takes place is the Water Development Board requires the SJRA to issue bonds and issue them to the Texas Water Development Board, and then the Water Development Board is actually purchasing those bonds from SJRA. Now, the financial assistance comes in the way that the interest rates are structured by the Water Development Board. And so probably the best thing to do at this point is to turn it over to Jan and Ryan and let them walk through what we call a private placement memorandum, which is the sort of document summarizing the transaction that goes in the transcript of proceedings, and it's a document that gets provided to the Water Development Board. It's more or less in their form, but it outlines the transaction. So I'll turn it over to Jerry.
All right, at your place, the private placement memo is sitting there. I wasn't planning to go through this in excruciating detail. Suffice it to say, it's kind of a preliminary, we prepare a preliminary official statement anytime we're going to the open market, and that's a pretty robust document that goes into a full disclosure about all the stuff that's going on with the authority and everything that could be relevant for any potential bondholder. Since these are actually going to be sold to the Texas Water Development Board, it is considered a private placement, so the level of disclosure is somewhat reduced, I'd say significantly, really. But this private placement memo, as Mitch said, kind of outlines some of the basics about the transaction, how the bonds are structured. A lot of it goes back and references the bond resolution, which again is kind of, you have one of those when you sold in the open market as well, but that's really your contract with the bondholders, in this case the Water Development Board, that outlines all the provisions for the bonds, sets up the interest rates and the terms, redemption provisions, again, all summarized in here. So I guess the highlights to hit, one of the things to point out about these bonds, so Mitch mentioned that because of the strength of the underlying Woodlands muds and their credit quality, and we went to S&P to get a rating for this particular pledge, because this is, while the Woodlands Division does have bonds outstanding, to date, all of those have been supported by capacity charges because they were for building the system and expanding the capacity of the system to be able to facilitate the development and the growth within the woodlands. Now we're at the point where these systems they need rehab, they need repair and rehabilitation. And so now the way the contract's structured, we can't use those same capacity type charges to back these bonds. We have to use the net revenues produced from our new rate order, and basically the net revenues produced by the Woodlands Division will go to support these bonds. So it is a new pledge, so in that vein, we had to go back to S&P to get a rating for this particular pledge. Unsurprisingly, the rating they came back with is an A+, which is the same as what you have on your other outstanding Woodlands bonds. Again, a very strong credit rating, and it does help with as Mitch mentioned, it helps with the rates that the Water Development Board then passes on to us. So the bonds are structured for 25-year level debt service, roughly. We talk about some of the things that I'll get to that at the appendix, but the bonds do have a call feature on here. It's got a 10-year call, which is mandated by the Water Development Board, so the bonds wouldn't be redeemable until October 1 of 28. Let's see what else. We do talk about some of the outstanding litigation that's pending before the authority, so we can discuss that briefly here. And then if we flip to Appendix A, and we're kind of stepping a little bit on the presentation, but it does show the structure of the bonds. So the first principal payment would be on October 1 of 2019. Final maturity October 2042. As I mentioned, the bonds are structured for roughly level debt service. The interest rates that we received from the water board are listed there as well on Appendix A. But I'm going to flip over to the presentation now because I think this is a more succinct way to present kind of the results of the sale. So it looks very similar to the handout that we just went through on the refunding, but this will have the Woodlands Division at the top. The first 2 pages behind the cover are some more market information. It's a little bit repetitive of what we looked at on the refunding, so I was going to skip through that and get to page 4 of that presentation that talks about the comparison of the rates received. So, as Mitch mentioned, these rates that we received from the Texas Water Development Board are subsidized by the federal government and really do produce some very attractive interest rates if you're looking to borrow some money. So what we did is took some of those same took estimated open market rates from those same underwriters a week ago, which is the same date that we got the rates from the water board, and did a quick comparison of what the debt service might have looked like if we sold if we were trying to produce the exact same amount of project dollars through an open market sale compared to us selling through the water board. So if we had sold through the open market, we were looking at a borrowing rate of about 3.6%. That would have produced total debt service about $65.5 million. Because we went through the Water Development Board and were successful in getting our application through for the state revolving fund, we were able to sell these bonds at a 1.6% interest rate, almost a 2% reduction in what we could have received in the open market. That results in a total debt service of just about $51 million, savings of about $14.6 million over the life of the bonds. Not insignificant savings. Very, very, very pleased with the rates that we received from the Water Board, and definitely happy with the result. Page 5 does go through the annual debt service schedules. You can see what our annual payments will be on these new bonds, the principal structure there. If you look at that coupon column there in the middle of the table, those zeros are accurate. We're paying 0% interest on those first 3 maturities. And the final maturity, which is, I know it says 8/31 because that's on the fiscal year, but that's the 10/1/42 maturity. We're only paying 1.71% interest on that particular maturity. So again, very attractive result for the authority. Highly recommend that we move forward with this sale to the water board. Assuming that the board is agreeable, we are set up to close on this issue on November 7th. So at that time, we'd actually issue the bonds to the water board and we would receive the funds from them. And some of that will get released to closing to pay cost of issuance and establish our debt service reserve fund. A large portion of it will probably go into escrow to be used as the construction projects are let and the dollars are needed. So, any questions about the sale results or anything that anybody would like to add?
And I know one question that came up, well, you talk about availability of funds, is once the funds are ready, we're ready to start on, some of the engineering has been done. We anticipate all projects will be completed within the next 2 to 3 years. So, as far as time frame.
I guess the last thing I'll point out is the 43 million that we've talked about, it's actually slightly less than that because the interest rates are so much lower. Part of what we were setting money aside for was that debt service reserve fund, and because the interest rates are so much lower, we're able to reduce the amount of bonds that we're going to sell by a little bit. So it's 42,895, not 43 million even, but that does produce $40 million that should be set aside for actual projects to be constructed.
Excellent.
Okay, is it,
The Woodlands people get it, right? I mean, the mud
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yes, oh, yes. They're on board.
No, that's why they finally
Why
approved it.
wouldn't you borrow at 1.8%? It'd be ridiculous to do it any other way.
Right.
The customers
why
have
they ended
been
up
very
going for it.
pleased with the results of the transaction. And so the scope of this project, it's a gravity main replacement that you can't do very well in little pieces year over year,
Right.
which is the way we've been cash financing so much of our improvements. You need to take it all down at once. So the customers see that there's a low interest rate environment, and we're able to essentially take a portion of the funds that they were going to use in year-over-year improvements and allocate those to paying debt service on these bonds, and essentially you're getting to knock out the whole project without having to go through a rate increase.
Right. They're on board.
Yeah.
So everyone's supportive, along with the backup included with the agenda items was the draft bond resolution. So as Ryan said, we'll need to update Article 3 of the bond resolution to include the final principal amounts and interest rates as shown in Appendix A to the private placement memo. Other than that, the bond resolution would be in final form as presented today. I'm happy to go through it in detail, but I'll also open it up for questions or any requests to go through that document in detail. Anyone want to take a more detailed run through of the bond resolution, given that it came out in your agenda package?
We adopted the rate order for the Woodlands. That new order will reflect any savings in the bond issue.
Yeah, I mean, that was the budgeted rate for this coming year, and in that budget, we had assumed some debt service for this year. Really, the debt service on these bonds is going to be more impactful, not for this year, but for future years. So the savings realized from our relative to our projections to what we actually received, those would be reflected in future rates, more so than this year's.
any other question or discussion? Not, I'll entertain a motion. On 7C, no, I'm sorry, 7B9. We'll get it right.
Ronnie?
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to 7C. Item 1 is the only item under the raw water enterprise. We have our proposed raw water rate order. Now, we laid this out to the board with a detailed PowerPoint back in July. We also laid out the budget, all of the data that relates to the raw water rate order. All of that was presented in PowerPoint at the July board meeting. The intention, obviously, was to leave that laying on the table so that you could review that for a month and provide comments on the raw water rate order. We had to cancel the August board meeting due to the hurricane, so it's been 2 months now. We didn't receive any comments on the rate order, so we still, recommend approval of the rate order as it was presented and discussed at the July board meeting. If there are any questions, I know it's been a long time since it was laid out for discussion, and including the budgets and all the data that go into it. Staff would be happy to address any questions. But as it stands, unless you have questions, we'd recommend approval of the rate order. This is for the raw water enterprise.
Right. So, questions, discussion? I have and I guess, Ron, there are a lot of things go into this, the rate order. And so, I know one of the costs are litigation items. And I just want to make sure those are
we'll actually have to, litigation's recently filed. So we'll have to review the anticipated costs related to the litigation, and that'll have to be worked into the mix.
The current litigation is not in anybody's budget currently.
Right.
Okay.
This rate increase was the recommended amount in the 2014 rate study. And we have a new rate study underway, which will take the litigation, once we get a better estimate of those costs, into account. So we'll be coming back next year with any potential changes to scheduled rate increases as a result of that litigation.
So, we're talking about litigation regarding flooding issues on this rate, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Just that would be the primary one that would impact the raw water enterprise.
All right. Any questions, comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion on 7C1.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Motion carries.
All right, that's all the items on the regular agenda. We do have need for a closed session to brief the board on some litigation-related matters.
Okay. All right. Date is September 28, 2017. The time is 9:36. The board will now convene an executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071 for consultation with attorney. We'll return shortly. All right, we're back in order here. And we have the schedules and all that. I don't have any other items on here. If anyone has anything other than that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right,
Motion.
Second.
We're adjourned.
thank you very much. See you next month.